Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Vina, and welcome to the SmartTechCheck podcast, where we cover all tech topics that are smart home, home automation, home security, and console gaming related. Today is Wednesday, September 16th, 2020. The subject of today's podcast is a recap and analysis of yesterday's big Apple announcement. They announced a bunch of new Apple Watches yesterday, new iPads. Sadly, no new iPhones, but the rumor is that will be coming along in October, so we'll certainly be back to report on that. In today's podcast, I'm joined by an individual who has joined me before for many, many podcasts and discussions on consumer tech, and that's Rob Pegorraro. Hello, Rob. How are you?
Good.
You know, I could repeat your credentials, but you'll do a much better job than I will. So why don't you just tell the audience a little bit about the publications that you've written for?
All right. So lately, you might have seen my byline in USA Today, where I do a sort of tech support column, which is basically explaining 5G in a different form every month or so. Fast Company, where I've actually also been writing a lot about 5G. Wirecutter, the New York Times review site, where we're now once again updating the guide to smartphone plans. It's a lot of math. It's going to get me in trouble at some point. I did a long piece for O'Reilly Media, the technical textbook publisher, about COVID-19 exposure notification and contact tracing apps. And I'm probably forgetting a client or two, but that's about the lay of the land.
So you've been busy this summer. You haven't been exactly comatose.
No, I would have thought I would have had more time to work on the garden. On the other hand, it is mosquito season on the East Coast, so it's not, totally great to leave the house.
Well, and your Redskins have started off well. We have
Washington football team, and I've said they should have.
Oh, I forget. I said the nasty word. I said the Redskins. I'm sorry.
Washington team : football, because they would have sold so many WTF T-shirts.
Oh boy, that's a separate podcast in itself. Anyway, big announcement yesterday. I'm sure you watched the that Hollywood-like production, which, frankly, we should talk about that for a second, is that their productions are so slick. And, as I live in San Jose, maybe 3 miles away from the spaceship campus. And of course, all of this content was pre-recorded, but it was really, and this is not the first time it was done like this, but a tremendously flashy, from a special effects standpoint, with the zooming of cameras, right, the drone-like shots, throughout the campus. What was your overall impression of the event?
Yeah, no, I mean, Apple's always been good at advertising, and what they've done is essentially taken their keynotes that you used to have in these live events that I vaguely remember going to, and that you'd have at the Worldwide Developers Conference, and just said, well, if we can't have the audience full of invited guests clapping and cheering, what else can we do to jazz it up? So it's lots of, really slick transitions and cuts. So Tim Cook will throw to someone who appears to be in the Steve Jobs Theater at the other corner of the campus. And then you go back to somebody in some lab and, really giving you a sense of, right, there are all of these people at Apple inside this huge spaceship, which you can easily see from a plane on the way into SFO, that are hard at work, finding the next great thing for you to spend a lot of money on.
Right. And honestly, and I want to get to the subjects at hand here, I'm very, very impressed with the events, and I've been to many of their live events, WWDC and other Apple events. And I have to say, and you'd probably say it because, you're a technology journalist, I get a little bit tired of the kind of the cheerleading. It's almost like a rock concert, and you have to be in the audience to really get a palatable sense of how that kind of craziness is really, it's very, very tangible. But sometimes you'll hear the crowd, the Apple fanboy, so to speak, they'll cheer. They'll take the most obscure feature and make it sound like it was reinventing, a nuclear reactor. Like for example, I remember one event where it was when they introduced dark mode, into the operating system. And okay, let me understand this now. The operating system is now going to be intelligent enough to know that it's 6 o'clock at night in a particular part of the country. The sun is probably down, and it's going to have to adjust the level of brightness on the screen. Now, don't get me wrong, that's a nice feature, but I'm not sure it's a game changer. But you had to be in the audience
Yes.
to make sure like it was the greatest
Yeah.
feature of all
And of
time.
course, the pitch for dark mode was all wrong. The real payoff has been now that nobody can sleep through the night
Exactly.
anymore. When you wake up for
Right.
no reason at 4 a.m, you can flip on dark mode and check your email without, waking up your spouse. So
That's
great
exactly
feature
right.
that I wish we didn't have to use.
Well, getting past all the Apple, uh, the Bafo like special effects.
Yeah.
What were the big 2 or 3 takeaways you had at the event? Of the event?
So first of all, how well Apple has done with smartwatches. I will admit I was a little skeptical when they first debuted the Apple Watch and there was all this fuss. And then in practice, you'd realize, oh yeah, it does all these things, but it has these tiny apps that you can't really use. And it doesn't actually show the time unless you raise your wrist in the right way. But Apple sort of incremented, which is what they do, updated it, worked on it, extended the battery life, used the fact that they can, order up whatever chip they need, and latched on to health tech as the sales pitch that would really make this work. Even before they had the sales boost nobody wants, a global pandemic.
Right. Well, that was interesting too. I mean, they were clear that now with adding, measuring blood oxygen levels, that gives you some insight into. They didn't say obviously it was going to cure you.
My Apple Watch, if you want to live.
If you want to live, exactly. That's probably the way it kind of came across. But what's always impressed me, and you and I have talked about this before, is that Apple does such a great job before they even introduce the products themselves. They really want to make sure the consumer understands how credible they are from a health device standpoint. So they've signed up some really substantial, medical organizations. They've got a relationship with Stanford. I mean, it's probably as long as my arm in terms of parties who are involved in their health initiative. Not to mention, which they actually have doctors on their staffs.
Right.
By the way, that's not a doctor. That's real medical doctors. So that to me was very interesting. But certainly they have doubled down on health in a big way. Measuring blood oxygen level is going to be a significant deal. Of course, they had a video during the presentation on a woman with diabetes, if I recall.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, and she talked about how wonderful it's going to be able to help her manage that condition. But yeah, I mean, you really got to kind of be excited about really taking the simple watch and now expanding it to beyond just messages, a communications device. I mean, and we haven't even gotten into the health kick,
right?
Fitness. I want to get your impressions on the whole Fitness Plus angle.
Yeah. So the other thing that strikes me about the focus on the Apple Watch is this health tracking computer strapped to your wrist. This is a case where Apple's focus on privacy really intersects very well and appropriately with what they're trying to sell, because the privacy case for, the notifications from your IM client show up on your watch, that's not a huge privacy risk because you're in a chat with the other person. They know what you're up to. Right. But when it's your actual pulse, medical data that is picking up directly from your skin, you want to know that's protected. And Google, they're trying to buy Fitbit. That's going to be a problem for them because they can't say privacy has been our product. We take pride in how little data we actually extract and how much we throw away. Apple can make that sales pitch.
And they went out of the way to point out things that some people might think are mundane. For example, the calories that you burn in a particular exercise, they're not going to share that information. That information is sitting on the device. And personally, Rob, as much as I like you, I really want to know how many calories you burned using your elliptical.
Well, people worry about it. If you had a smartwatch non-optimized for privacy, it would know that you went on a bike ride, you burned 1,000 calories. The Yelp app on your phone would say, "Hey, treat yourself. Get a second slice of pizza."
And by the way, with geolocation, and by the way, there's a pizza place right around the corner. Right. Only 50 feet away. We made jokes about that, but Apple's focus, and it's been for many years on being best in class when it comes to privacy. I think it's going to pay off as they develop the iPhone and the Apple Watch into more things just beyond using it as a communications device. And they get into health, especially when they get into health, when this really becomes a device that can measure a number of things, not just your heartbeat, but your blood oxygen levels, sweat sweat detection, which there's things you can do with that to ascertain imbalances in your regimen. I mean, there's a lot of different things they'll be able to extract over time as the watch becomes more sophisticated. So yeah, so I think the privacy thing is going to pay off for them.
Yep.
You know, the other thing I think was a big deal. You know, from a business standpoint, they're offering a low-cost model. You know, they're expanding their footprint.
Yep.
Maybe it doesn't have all the bells and whistles as the Six does, but they are obviously recognize that they want to get to a larger TAM. You know, from a market appeal standpoint. And then the thing that I think that probably will be appealing, not to me because I'm single, but it certainly might be appealing to you because you do have a family, is that family sharing feature. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So the idea is Apple at some point noticed that, hey, if we're going to make everyone buy an iPhone to pair an Apple Watch to it, that's going to hold us back a little bit. And so in the same way that they eventually realized maybe we don't want to force every iPad owner to have a real computer to set it up with. So that now you have this option where you, the parent, you have an iPhone, you can then buy an Apple Watch for each of your kids, although it's got to be an LTE enabled model. So that's more expensive and you got a monthly bill. Your kids each have their own phone number. You can see where they're at from GPS on the watch. You can set the watch in do not disturb mode so they can't actually see chat pings or whatever. And apparently the watch face lights up and was like a yellow color or beige or something. So presumably their teacher or babysitter or whoever can see that, oh yeah, okay, right. They should actually be doing schoolwork now.
Now just using you as a sample of one, which is always dangerous when I ask this question. The fact that now they're going down this path where they really want to unhook the Apple Watch from having to have a phone on a one-to-one basis. That's really what the family sharing feature allows you to do. You can add more more watches, I'm sure, to the family without it being paired directly on a one-to-one basis to a phone. Do you think that in your case, you would be more willing to get an Apple Watch for one of your kids before you get them a phone?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the issue was
that?
More not so much the complexity of the device, but the cost and the odds of it getting, cracked or smashed. I will say I like the trend of, untying the watch from the phone. But I'm also saying that as an Android phone user, because the Android watch options are pretty bad. Samsung's doing good work. And that's kind of about it in the US. I know I was talking to our friend Avi Greengard with the analysis firm Texponential the other day, and he said, Huawei's doing great work. Not that matters to us. So it's bad that Google put all this effort into this category a few years ago and then didn't think to check to see if, there'd be an adequate supply of increasingly more power efficient smartwatch chips from Qualcomm. That hasn't happened. Samsung doesn't have the problem because they can make their own silicon, same way Apple does. So it's weird that the one company that's doing really well with this is also the one that's a little pricier and a little pickier than the rest of the tech industry.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting observation. The one thing that but they didn't talk about it at all during the announcement event yesterday. But they didn't talk a whole lot about battery life on the watch because one of the challenges with the Apple Watch and most watches, but particularly the Apple Watch, is you really get about a day charge out of it. You can get over more than if you just want time, and because it goes into this reserve mode, it can last for a long time. But my challenge with it, and I suspect I'm not the only one, is that if you really want to use it as a helpful sleep monitoring device, you have to wear it all night. And unfortunately, I charge it at night. I just charge
I guess you need one you can quick charge while you're showering and brushing your teeth and whatnot. Otherwise, I mean, I guess that isn't.
I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say, Mark, you should buy 2 Apple Watches. You should have one when you're sleeping. One.
That is what Apple wants you to do.
That could be their strategy. I'm sure Tim Cook would love that. 2 for 1. But no, I guess the point I'm making is that for me, until they get the battery life to last, 2-3 days, using it as a sleep monitoring device is challenging because the only way you can do that is you have to have it while you're sleeping. So.
Yeah. I mean, that does make me think that there should be room for something that's not a feature watch, since that would just tell time.
Right.
But one that really pares it down to basic health tracking stuff, tells the time. And, I guess the message triage is done on your phone somehow. So you only see the messages you actually care about, not, the latest marketing email from, Brooks Brothers or whatever.
You're dating yourself, Brooks Brothers. That's some reference.
Yes, I, very much so.
I would have used another reference, but that's okay. We'll give
I'm
you.
an East Coast guy.
I was going to say Joseph Banks or something like that.
Well, those
They've
two,
got out
yeah.
of business. They've got out of business.
They're even worse with the marketing emails.
Exactly. I never figured Joseph Banks out. You know, you could buy 5 suits for $99. I don't understand how that business model works.
They make it up in volume.
Could be volume. So yeah, let's turn our attention to the iPads, because there was iPad announcements.
Yep.
They refreshed their their entry level model, and they refreshed their iPad Air, which is kind of their bleeding edge model. Although they didn't refresh the large Pro form factor, the large one. What were your initial thoughts? Were you jazzed? Kind of business as usual?
My reaction was kind of meh about the new iPad, aka 8th generation iPad, where it's the logical update you'd expect, but it's no big deal. The iPad Air was more interesting to me for a couple of things. Number one, here I've got my iPad mini in front of me. They managed to figure out how to fit a Touch ID sensor into the little power button at the top,
right?
Which, if they can put that into the next iPhone, which I don't know, because design on that hardware would have started way pre-pandemic, would solve the problem that we all have these phones that are no good with our faces covered, because the facial recognition does not work well enough for that. I don't know if we're going to see that. It would be great.
Yeah, it would be great. You're wondering if they're walking away from Face ID, which is a more expensive capability for them to have inside a.
Honestly, I think they should, given that I don't think we're going to stop wearing masks. I think it's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in Asia who's had the practice of wearing masks on like subways during flu season, they were onto something. We should have been paying more attention to that.
Well, certainly if they move to a biometric touch capability on the button, on the power button, which is challenging because it's very, very small.
Yeah.
And it's probably smaller than the one on the iPad Air. If they could somehow pull that off, the other advantage that gives them is they can throw out that cutout on the screen.
Yeah.
Which that's bothered a lot of people. Certainly, it's bothered developers because so your app is sometimes cut off by that portion of the screen. So that could be interesting.
So the other thing that struck me about the new Air, actually two other things. One is the amount of time they spent talking about the A14 processor on it, in a way that made me think, this is an appetizer for the marketing pitch we'll get when you have the first Mac with Apple Silicon sometime between now and the end of the year. Which I would like it to be a Mac Mini. I'm sure I will be disappointed in that wish because Apple just doesn't want me to buy a new desktop from them. But whatever it is, we know what Apple's sales pitch will look like from what we just heard. And the other was the Air switched from using a Lightning connector to using a USB-C connector, making it even more impossible to decide when Apple is just going to rip off the Band-Aid, acknowledge the inevitable, and kill the Lightning cable finally, so we can all just buy one charger that'll recharge every device we have.
But leave it to Apple to be able to take a pitch where they remove something. And I agree with you for the complexity argument that you're bringing up. Lightning, USB. You look in your closet, you've got a million cables. So I get that. But at the end of the day, you go out and buy an iPad, which is an expensive item, and you don't get a USB adapter with it, charger, I should say.
Right.
And they pitched it as, well, you're doing your pitch for the environment. So only Apple could say you're not getting something, but because you're not getting something, you are giving something back to Mother Earth.
We're giving you less because we care.
Yes. So that's delicious. That's delicious marketing.
Of course, there's always the chance, Apple being Apple, they will just get rid of the port entirely and say, sync will only be over Wi-Fi and charging will be wireless, which would be sort of the most Apple way of.
Oh, that's going to happen one day.
The circle.
That's a separate podcast. Yeah. There are wireless charging, short-range wireless charging technologies out there, but they're not as robust, of course, as having been plugged in. And there's other issues with it. And my thing, I hate to use the word, lukewarm. I mean, I thought the amazing stat they threw out there was 53% of people who buy an iPad are new to the iPad. Which was
that's higher than I expected.
Yeah, that's an intriguing stat. The thing that was interesting to me is that they continue to position iPad as a very credible alternative to a traditional PC. I mean, they've made a number of enhancements in iPad OS. They've added trackpad support. with the right accessory. They've added mouse support. You
Yep.
now can do. They have virtual, not virtual, but multiple windows. It's more like a real full-blown operating system. There is one feature that they don't have, which I want you to talk about, because you've brought this up to me multiple times, because you have multiple parties in your family that would love to use a single device, and you just don't want to give it to them for a whole bunch of different reasons. So let's talk about that.
Kids mode, where is it? So this is something, I mean, Microsoft had this nailed in like 2012 with the Kids Corner feature of Windows Phone. You press a button and the device enters this sort of special single user account where only designated apps are available. Your data is walled off, your notifications don't show up. So when people inevitably yell at me on Twitter, my kid doesn't have to see it. And Apple's attitude seems to be that I should buy another iPad for my kid. Well, no, if she's going to get her own tablet, it'll be a Kindle Fire Kids Edition from Amazon, because it's way cheaper. And, she doesn't actually need all the processing power that's on this thing, as long as it runs the handful of apps she needs. I don't know why Apple isn't addressing that when you've got multiple user profiles on the Apple TV. So why not on this other device that, especially this year, I'm sure kids have been asking their parents to borrow way more often than before, because no one's leaving home as much.
It's not a technically hard feature, to your point. To me, it would expand the value proposition in a pretty significant way. I don't want to be so cynical to think, well, if we add that, people will be buying less iPads. I'm not that cynical.
I think Apple will figure out a way to sell more crap to us. That's going to happen.
Yeah. So I don't know if I would want to chalk that one up as an objection, but yeah, it is odd that they haven't added that capability. And there are times, how many times have you had your phone with you and someone says, "Can I borrow your phone to make a call?" And you might have some information on the phone that you don't necessarily want to give to somebody, whether it's text messages or emails or whatever, that you may not necessarily want. Even a close friend, you may not want them to see what's on your phone.
Yep.
So that is an interesting feature that I think that I have to believe that's on their radar.
Yeah, it should have been a while ago. I just, when they didn't talk about it at all at WWDC in July, I'm like, this isn't happening. If they don't mention the feature.
Oh, that's a feature that we'll get visibility at a WWDC. So I guess you'll have to wait till June of next year.
Yes.
Last question though, where are you? Where is your head on the whole iPad as a notebook replacement, portable replacement?
So it's interesting. I did a couple of pieces for Wirecutter. This is going back like I can't even tell when this year started, but let's say a few years back, about, how did like the iPad Pro rate as a laptop replacement? And at the time, number one, the issue is once you buy the sturdy keyboard that also mounts it so it stands upright as a laptop, you're approaching a laptop's cost. And you still don't have things like just getting data physically on and off of an iPad. You can't just pop in a flash drive the way you normally could. Lots of basic stuff like file transfer from one device to another is harder than it should be. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, things are simpler. There's less maintenance overall with an iPad than with even a MacBook Air. So that's an advantage. You can actually touch the screen on the iPad and it does things, whereas on the MacBook Air, it just collects fingerprints.
Yes.
And it's been really interesting to me to see how Apple and Microsoft have responded. Apple is making its tablets more like a laptop, I guess because it can. Microsoft has to make Windows more of a tablet-friendly OS because it tried to play in the tablet space, and Windows Phone, Windows Mobile went nowhere. Mm-hmm. So instead, it's been doing really great stuff, I think, with Windows. So you can take your laptop, flip the screen around. It's a slightly heavier tablet. Suddenly you can actually, use it on the tray table of an airplane whenever we all get back to experiencing that. And Apple thinks, the laptop is saying the screen opens this far and that's it.
Yeah. What's intriguing is that, Microsoft may get another swing at the bat now that foldable designs are coming down the road, because that's going to open up a whole new, interesting opportunities. And, I've spoken to a number of people that, if you look at what, Microsoft is doing with the Surface Duo and other types of form factors, and that's going to take years for that to kind of cement and
Yeah.
ensconce with some people. But I do think that the foldable element, where there's two screens, a clamshell notebook that folds, that can go backwards, and you have two displays on either side. Whether it's it's a single LCD that can fold, that essentially just is more economical from a real estate standpoint when you put it in your pocket. That's going to open up a number of different interesting opportunities, and I have to believe Apple is looking at that space as well.
Yes.
One
would think. We'll never know until they announce it. Until
they pull the trigger on that. But now this has been really interesting. And, of course, the non-news was they didn't announce new iPhones, but that certainly will be coming in October. Before we sign off, what's your take on 5G? Will you be upgrading to a?
I will not. So the more I've looked at it, the more I've concluded that for most people, this is not any kind of must-have feature. On the one hand, you have the kinds of 5G that are being sold. The millimeter wave stuff that Verizon has is really, really scarce. It is not just
which is the variant of 5G that you want, by the way.
Parts of the block, yeah.
But it's got downsides with it, of course.
Yeah, the stuff I'm most bullish about is the mid-band 5G that right now only T-Mobile has. Verizon and AT&T are buying up spectrum so they can offer that as well. That will have better speed than the low-band 5G they have right now, which my friend Sasha Sagan at PC Mag calls more like 4.9G, and will not have the really horrendous range problems of millimeter wave 5G, and should have enough capacity to allow it to be a form of residential broadband. Because there's so many people right now, including, I'm across the Potomac from DC. In Arlington, we have Verizon and Comcast. In Alexandria, like 3 miles that away, they only have Comcast or Verizon DSL if you want to kick it old school. So lots of people would like competition, and 5G could do that. And the other thing is, I had a really great conversation with Qualcomm's president, Cristiano Amon, for Fast Company 2 or so weeks ago, right after his big talk at IFA, the tech show in Berlin we did not go to. One of the perks of American citizenship these days. And I was sort of trying to pin him down on what is mass market 5G going to be like, economy class 5G. And he basically said, for the phones that'll be in the billions of users and coverage that'll get to most people, it's not going to be millimeter wave. Right. Even though they lead off all their pitches with that. It'll be low band and mid band.
Right.
And you know what? That's fine. Let's not obsess over, the business class 5G. That may be great, but is not going to be reality in most of our lives for most of the time anytime soon.
I love your airline travel analogies.
I miss
they're
airplanes.
Perfectly suited. Well, it's going to be an interesting. The only way I would conclude the podcast is that, these new phones are going to be very expensive when they come out.
Yes.
They will certainly be 5G. It will be interesting to see what variants of 5G are built in the phone. Hard for me to believe that Apple's going to come out with a $1,500 5G phone that doesn't have millimeter wave, scarce as it might be from a coverage standpoint. But we're in a pandemic, and while people are saving a lot of money, it'll be interesting to see how well the Apple brand stands up to. Can it overcome? Do you really need that $1,500 5G? iPhone?
No, not this year.
Well, we'll
the iPhone SE though looks like a great bargain. That's going to cause a lot of problems for Android vendors this holiday season, I bet.
It will be very interesting to see. But listen, Rob, thank you for participating in today's podcast. Thanks to the Moor Insights and Strategy audience for listening in today's podcast. Please follow us on our usual social media partners. That's Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And until next time, have a great week.